Hello, sir.
Oh, good. You're on Zoom. All right. Okay. So big headache.
Yep.
Let's see. Okay. So I have this special version of our book where I've added some of the years on top manually because
Okay.
they are the years that are referred to.
Yep.
And I'm trying to make it useful. So one of the things I did was this. No, that's not what I meant. I did, hang on a second.
Just on the right page, because this is an author, but most
Yeah,
people won't. Will people read? Can people get the author version of the book? Because if they don't have author, they can't see this.
That's completely correct. And that is a very important point, which is why, okay, I'll show you. Obviously, you know why that's an important point, but I'll show you,
No, I understand. Yeah.
I'll show you an issue with that. Because obviously we have all kinds of good things here. We have a few more people have added. By the way, Scott Retberg. I started with him where the title is a subheading.
Yep.
So then we automatically get it here. Bob, same. But if I now go 1989, right? Just a random number that happens to be a date. That's all it does now, as expected.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just see. Some of these people have dates, some don't. Okay, so here, because I'm experimenting, 2022 is actually a link.
Yeah.
And it's a link to a year to experiment with layout. So it has nothing in it. But what it does is it searches everything below.
And it does that in Reader as well.
This is Reader.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. I mean,
you're
right. I think
there's a really important point coming up. Because you've highlighted something, but it's even more than that. You see, fuck's sake. I'm just trying to find. Okay, I will have a date because I put that in. Yeah, that's a weird bug. But clearly, I'm there. By the way, it would be nice if you give us your birth date. Right.
Yeah.
So here's my point, and thank you for really highlighting it. Hashtags are really useful because they mean that the word person will not be interfered with if it doesn't have the hashtag. But what do we do for dates? Like right now, wouldn't it be useful to be able to pivot so that 1944 is interactive?
Yes, it would be, but I think I wouldn't be. I absolutely understand. I mean, I think we share a passion for these things, but the point is, there's a lot to do here, and I think actually it's as useful at this point to just show how hard this is, because it's not even just the problem of doing this in author. It's doing it in the context that what we're trying to do is we're trying to write documents that contain, from which extracting metadata that allows us to use a richer context. And most people just don't get that. It's a somebody else. It just happens magically behind the software.
I agree with you, and that is where we're going. But the thing is, currently, as you know, I can click on Egypt and it'll show me definition of Egypt. But if I select 1944 and I do Command F, nothing happens. Oh, sorry, I just exit this view. So an alternative would be, oh, that's really weird. What's going on? Obviously, that's a weird. Let me just export a more normal one.
Sure. Well, while it's exporting it, just a thought is, I mean, the thing is, the dilemma you've got, I think you're between, it's this classic thing between rock and a hard place. Do you want every year, every possible year since the creation of the universe to be a thing? No, you don't.
That's not.
But the problem sort of comes. So what that general point leads to is, and so how do we work out the ones we want to know about? So, for instance, even not everything that has, for instance, is necessarily a year of significance. So that there seem to be two parallel and important discrete strands here. One is the ability to sort of just, in the general sense, say, what happened in 1953. The other is the targeted thing. So no, I want to see I want to see the wider picture of how 953 wraps onto it. The first can almost be done with just a simple search text.
That's not the issue I'm looking at now, though.
Okay.
And by the way, I think this was the visual meta has been broken by adding, maybe it was got that big, because there's some of them are quite long. He is not the longest, but what I'm trying to say is that's not what we're looking at, is a few different things.
I wonder.
Okay, so just importantly, when you're talking about every year, like here, we don't have every year. We just have the years that are referenced in the notes. So that's why there are many gaps. So that's an interesting, different question. But the question is how to interact with it. So, for instance, Bob Stein, I think. Right. Okay. Like 1946 here, right? This one kind of works. So we have Bob Stein here, that he's doing something. This is genuinely useful. And I agree with Bob Horn that very often birth dates are not useful, but they are when you're looking at who came first. Was it Doug Engelbart, or Steve Jobs? Someone will wonder about that at some point. Same with references, of course. So here's one issue. So what I would like to have, and this is just an implementation issue, but it's since you refer to it, I would like to be able to click on 1946 and have this automatically happen. So it does a search on that. So
right.
that goes a small way, but that is not the reason I called you is a bigger reason.
Yep.
I'm going to move things around here. So in author in this, okay, I just want to make sure I don't mess up the good documents. Okay, here in the timeline one, what I did was I spent a lot of time hiding stuff that didn't have time associated with it, which gave us, so I started with this and I decided, wouldn't it be cool if some command, if you don't have time, you're gone visually for a moment, right?
Yeah.
So that's beginning to be useful. And then now that has been established, you can now choose to click on different items in there and see how they relate, because Adobe, we have the founding, but for Doug Engelbart, we have several dates, his birthday, major publications, events and stuff. And this is where I'm saying for the kind of stuff we care about, a straight timeline is not that interesting, because 62 and 68 is a paper and a demo, of course, it's not birth and death. But for the way we want people to navigate, it matters. So you can see things like that, right?
Well, this is the problem that, I mean, it's difficult because I don't think there is I really don't think there's a simple answer. It is quite true that, for instance, that births and another way in which births and deaths aren't quite what we think them to mean is simplistically we say, yes, well, person X was born before person Y. That may be true, but that doesn't mean that person X contributed to the field before person Y, which is probably what we're more interested in knowing. And the problem of what you're alluding to is this ghastly, murky, either implied or supplied thing of which we lovingly and loosely describe as metadata, but it's something that somebody has to record. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having birth dates. I think a birth date of a year should be sufficient, because do we really worry about the month? If somebody, the point is, because now you get into a privacy issue. Not everyone necessarily.
There's also privacy, but what I'm going for here is two different things. One is, it would be nice if this could be an amazing view in VR, because there you have more space. You can have a huge timeline. But what I'm realizing more and more is something very different, and that is in what I wanted. So I made this video earlier. It's really short. I'll just talk it over.
Okay, sure.
You can see it, right?
Yeah.
So what I would really like in author is a way where if you select a hash, because hashes are categories in this world, of course, what you can do then is choose a command. I'm just gonna to hide everything that is that hash. Right. So for instance, here on infrastructure, I chose H, let's say, and then everything under it goes away.
Yeah.
But key is when I then choose to return it from a menu, it's all selected because chances are I could have messed up the layout and now I need to go somewhere else. Right. So similarly here, I select institution, delete everything under it, and I put it back in. You know, I can move it around anywhere, but when I then put it back in, it's one unit.
This sort of makes me think of, you know, the discussion we had at the last meeting about basically having a timeline view, which is, I mean, I know at this point it's all more work and something, and it doesn't exist now, but the rationale is quite interesting because really it's a view spec. Because what you're getting at with the heart of this, wanting to toggle things, is you've got a lot of complexity potentially here. So you have spatial map, which is really useful in a mind palace sense, but in a 2D sense, it is like a sort of, you know, you where it is what it is, in at least in the mind or the mind's eye of the author, if not the reader. But probably for when you start to do a sort of time-based query, you almost actually it helps to have things arranged on a time axis. I think we understand that more quickly because having the lines pointing to the links at the top is sort of fine in this, but you've already got an extremely busy map. I mean, the complexity of that to you as the author will be much less than the complexity of the viewer of that who's didn't really know much about this and might see it. And it's already, I would say, very complex.
Yeah. I agree. That's a huge problem. And the thing is,
so
the reason it becomes a problem is we could, of course, have bars and all of that, but this is the main reason I'm calling you here. So imagine I have control clicked or whatever on person, hashtag person. So I'd like to design this menu if you agree with the idea of what it should do. Okay. So now we forget about time for a moment because that's tangential. First of all, hide this tag person, just hide it. That obviously can do now with just H. But then it is hide everything tagged with person. Hide both person and tagged, because the second one is supposed to be leave person there. Even just talking to you helps. Leave person and hide all tagged with person, because that's kind of like having the category on the screen as we saw earlier, right? And then we have this bottom one, hide everything else. What do you think?
What happens if someone is tagged with person and something else? Because so this goes back to the fact.
Tell me what you think could happen, because that's a great question.
Well, and without meaning to digress, but I mean, I'm not sure, because when you originally showed your hashtags, that apart from the time aspect, they actually seemed probably discrete categories, in the sense that someone is not an event and a person.
No, but that's
this is an important thing, because
Mark, it's a really good question. It's a really good question. So
so no, it's to help answer your question. The point being that even if this isn't how you've constructed the map now, if you, so I guess what I'm trying to do is designing within constraints. If we say, well, wait a minute, if these hashes are mutually incompatible, you can't be a member of more than one, then it's easier to toggle these things in and out. Which forces you. Wait, let me finish. Which forces you to deal with the issue. Well, what if I write a concept that covers several things? Well, maybe the answer is you need to structure your concepts differently, because it's a chicken egg. Which bit do you want to get difficult? If you want it to be easy to write something in free form text in a concept, then you're going to make your UI difficult. If you want to have your UI easier to construct, you might have to write your concepts more carefully in a more considered way. Is my rough thought at this point.
No, I agree with your questioning, but the answer is really simple. People will have hashtags that include both. Like you and Mark, you and Dini are both persons and hosts. That's a very normal.
In which case, in which case I think I would hide person if they're a member of more than one group, but somewhere you'd need to just tell, you need to sort of, or it might need to literally say, just flash a message that's saying, 6 things that have multiple hashtags have been hidden. I don't know, something you might want. This is this problem that as you've alluded to, people won't do what you want. So what does that lead to? That leads to somebody hiding something, and then, hiding something they didn't mean to hide because they didn't realize what they'd done, because they thought of concept X as being just a person, or sorry, just an event. They actually had personal information on it, was tagged as person. So I think it shifts your problem away from this dialogue. I think the answer is, if you say hide anything tagged person, hashtag person, then you hide all the concepts there that have that hashtag. And you park as I don't know quite how to deal with this yet, the fact that this will end up hiding some things that are not just persons. And you'll have to think through where it's appropriate, where and if it's appropriate to tell the person, even if it's only yourself, your future self, that you've done that. Does that help?
Yeah, that's an interesting issue, but it's really, what the options we're talking about here is hide this node, hide everything tagged with this, hide everything tagged but not the node, and the node, and then hide everything else. Just even wording this is really difficult.
Well, it's probably because your descriptions are overloaded. If you're saying hide person, what you're really saying is hide the person control.
Hide what? I didn't hear that.
So because in your caption,
just say it again. I just couldn't hear you.
Yes, right. The literal text hashtag person is fulfilling two different roles.
Exactly.
Same text is doing 2 discrete roles in your caption. One is talking about the control, essentially, the thing that's in yellow on the screen behind at the moment, and the other is all the things that it links to. You pick whatever semantics you like, and inadvertently, so I'm no foul here, but I think that's why it's difficult to write, because so the other is turn it round. I would almost say, hide the person tag, or whatever you're calling that thing in yellow on the screen, whatever your nomenclature is. So it's the on-screen label versus the thing that use that on-screen label.
Yeah, no, that is exactly the problem. If you
tease those two apart, your menu will be easier to write.
Yes, that's exactly the question. How do we do that?
Okay, so the question that falls from that then is, so what is the thing that's on screen that I'm looking at now that has a yellow box around it? What is that? What do you call that as the creator of the application?
It is exactly the 2 things you said. It is a node and it is the hashtag.
No. What do you call that thing? The thing that just went yellow, what is it? I just said
it's a node.
It's a node, right? Okay, so that is unambiguous. Stop a second, because we'll diverse. So that thing, all the things, every bit of text on there is a node, correct or not?
Yeah, but
if it's not, then that's not the answer.
Yes, it is, but it's not necessarily what the user will see it as. No one reads user guides. I call it.
Okay, fine, but
there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that.
Oh, I'm sure, but that's not the issue you're dealing with. So let's stick with node just for a second. Don't worry about. We can come back to it. What I mean is, if you just use the word node as a placeholder for the moment. So basically, you're saying hide person node. Hide only nodes tagged with person, or just you could just say hide tagged with person, but not node. Person node. It's just finding what this is edging you towards. You're absolutely right. The term node probably won't mean much to the user. So what your menu has to do is make it clear to them. So you can change the word node to something else. But I suspect the easiest way for you to resolve this is to use node to get you past this roadblock, And then you can say, yeah, node's a really bad word, we'll use something else, or we might use a couple of words or something. But I think that will get you to where you're going, because you're absolutely right. 99% of the world won't read the documentation even if you put it in front of them, and you make it very accessible. So that's absolutely right. And so if the word is too obscure, I mean, it's never going to make sense to everybody. Certainly not to those who probably aren't, first language speakers of English. So there's always some impediment there. But documentation, that ought to take the heavy lift of that. But I think this concept of saying the thing that's in yellow on screen, as we see here, is not the same as all the things it links to in the context of hashtag person. That, in this sense, the hashtag person node is the button, query, pick your description for all the things that use this hashtag. So it is at one level, it is a node, but it is a special node. It's a query node, for sake of argument. And I'm not saying use that term. So this is where your sort of hashtag items on screen, in the same way probably your date items, your year items on screen, are nodes, but not as other nodes, because they're like a special, they are a special type of object. So in that sense, so having established that these are all nodes on the map, you probably want to think through, I mean, it's always difficult trying to do this on the fly, but in this, you probably got at least 3 types of nodes on there, and maybe more if you've got your, I mean, I'm not thinking so much about the not defined and the italics. That goes to a different mechanic. But you have at the top of the screen, you have a set of nodes that are not the same as, say, a place or a person. And at the bottom, you've got your hashtag nodes, which are effectively, they are akin to query buttons. I in some cases, with the infrastructure thing, you use them as a label. And I would suggest that that's probably a bad line to go down. It's convenient in the short term. In the long term, it makes it more confusing, because it's confusing what the search tag node does, as opposed to something which is a label. Now, another thing I've lost sight of is where we are in terms of map, as to whether you have, the map has labels which are effectively non-functional nodes, which are literally labels on the map, or whether we don't have those, or whether you just have to have a node that is effectively doing the heavy lift as a label. But I would be careful. I think the hashtags make more sense if you put them across the bottom. They are clearly different to other things, and the very fact that you have given them a sort of visual and spatial separation from other things will sort of indicate to the user that these are perhaps slightly different to all these other ones in the middle.
Okay, so the interesting thing you said there was at the very end. Let's really focus on that.
Yep.
Because I have an assumption that we would like to have a highlight. Okay, I'm going to go to the real one now. 1 second, this is really important. I have an assumption that it is, okay, first I'm just going to show all hidden. That here, infrastructure, this needs a label on the screen. Just like locations needs a label, software, and so on, right?
Yeah, I would say your visual alignment and your visual association with those hashtags is probably far clearer to you than the author.
That's fine. That's fine.
It's a very genuine point here, because this is not me being critical of your map. I'm thinking about the problem that when I am the writer of something, because I know why I put Norway below location, but I mean,
Mark,
at what point?
That's what I was trying to say. Maybe this should be bold and not a hashtag, like a heading that's clear, right? This is primarily for the user.
You converted to me your notion. I take your point, and I was probably being a bit obtuse. So I said, about this thing of hashtags, but you make the good point that people broadly know that hashtag means category, because that's what you do when you put hashtag in as a search term or as a sort of like a keyword in something like Twitter. So if that is their role, they probably don't want to be labels. And if you need labels, then but you see, this brings me back to our 20 years of playing around with these sort of maps in Tinderbox, that there is no right way to do it. Because sometimes, so for instance, one of the metaphors that Tinderbox has is a so-called adornment, which effectively is it's something that lives. It's basically something stuck on the background. It's a simple way of putting it. So you've got all these movable bits at the front, but you, for instance, you might where you've got your software list, what you might have is a box that just says software.
I know what you're saying, and that's very useful. Yes.
It makes your maps more complicated. It makes them slightly harder to perhaps to learn, but I don't take that as a critique. I mean, I'm gonna park that for a second. I don't think that's a reason not to do it. I think you will find it easier if you divorce the spatial screen association labeling from those hashtag nodes, because otherwise they start to do double duty. That's where I think what you will find is you design yourself into a corner inadvertently.
Yeah, I have a feeling you're onto something. Yeah.
So the point is where you'd put hashtag infrastructure atop your list of infrastructure things, and you might even want the ability to have a very light bounding line or something, because for sake of example, I might just read down. Infrastructure is a long word, so I probably wouldn't miss it. But there's nothing to say that I, as a not particularly diligent reader or someone who's not particularly visual, might read down the list, get to Australia, and just keep on reading down and not visually parse that the things, PDF is not a location.
Yeah, but the thing is, as we talked about earlier, the use there is not just in author, it's also to be used in VR and reader. So that's why what you have gone through with Bob's murals of finding all these visual things that have issues, they will have issues. I'm trying to avoid that by having explicit relationships. So I agree with a lot of what you said. So let me just highlight how much I agree with you. So I've done it for a few. All I've done now is made them look different.
Yeah.
So they are clearly different. They probably shouldn't have that color. They should probably be bold, but that's another story.
Sure.
Right.
I'm thinking what I'm actually thinking is, you see, if you had something akin to what I was describing, sort of something sort of functionally, notionally equivalent to like sort of Tinderbox adornment. In other words, you have a box that you just draw around and say your infrastructure stuff. Now, one of the manifestations for export to virtual meta might be that anything that's in or on, if you prefer the terminology, on the infrastructure box will, on export to visual meta, be marked up additionally as being something to do with infrastructure. It doesn't mean it's the only way that might get that tag, but you don't. The point is, you might put something under infrastructure, and then it's that sort of job done. You don't have to think about did I have to make some explicit thing? Because bear in mind, a lot of what you're doing at the moment here is all inferred linkage, which is fine. But I think if I've learned anything over some recent decade or something, that can sometimes not scale quite in the way we think. So it sort of it's harder or messier, because things basically, despite your best intent, when you get to the other end of the process, things end up in the wrong boxes. In a way that it's then hard to unseen, because the program has done everything you've asked it to do, but just not quite in the way that you imagined, because it basically doesn't have enough granularity to tell. So I don't think, you see, when I see infrastructure, my mind is almost drawing a box around that, because I need my eye to stop reading at liquid and not put Brandel Zachanuk in the infrastructure box.
Yeah. See that? Do you see that weird flickering on my screen every once in a while?
Yeah, I didn't. I saw that.
Yeah, it's very odd. I don't know. I got it long after that happened. I got a little bit of coffee on my keyboard. I'm worried that if I bring it to Apple, they're going to say, "Oh no, liquid." So who cares?
Yeah.
So you're talking about something like this?
Yes, exactly, and without us getting too invested in the exact color or shape. But so we're just using this at the moment as a mental exploration, if you will. So now immediately I can see, and you know, it might be even fainter than this, but it's unambiguous to the reader who didn't write this that PDF through Liquid are infrastructure things. There might be other infrastructure things in there that link to the infrastructure hashtag, but I as the author have chosen to particularly to put those things in that place because I'm reminding myself that these are birds of a feather. And as you rightly say, one of them might be a person as well, so they can't go in the person box. But you're less likely to have a box for people. I suspect in any given map you'll have probably, you know, one or two nodes that are more general in the way that you're approaching things. You know, depending on what you're writing about, and others where you want to say no, because what you're really saying in this, in a way, is you're saying, right, you know, PDF is not a person because pretty much everybody else is.
Right. So this is a menu that I want to have. It doesn't exist. Hide blah blah or show blah blah, right?
Yeah.
So it should probably be, every other one should probably be show only. So because I think
yes, could be. Yep.
Yeah. So just like in VR, the Z axis, which you and I can't easily mock up, which we need the other guys for. With digital, it's the interaction. If you can toggle things on and off really quickly and easily, you don't need labels as much. Right. I still accept your point of what we have on the screen here, but okay, hang on. Let's just go here for a second. I'd like to Photoshop. Oh, we are on Photoshop, right? Let's address what you've said. Not here. Not here.
Because when you're doing it, part of what's going on here, this sort of thing of these bounding boxes, is partly because, in the sense that a lot of our systems, or the way we're trained to produce things in terms of information, that pushes us back towards an outline. Because one of the ways you deal with this, if you were trying to linearize that map, was you'd have a container. You know, you have an outline container called infrastructure, for sake of argument, and then a number of things underneath it, or the heading infrastructure would contain all the things that are probably in that group. I'm not saying that's a good thing. Again, that's probably a cultural tick that we have, but it's sort of where we are probably culturally.
Okay, hang on. I can't listen to you. I got to get this down.
Sorry.
Just 1 second, please. So logically, for the other menu, hide. Forget the fact that it's on screen. Hide this or hide everything. Okay. So I think I'm just gonna do a different layout.
Because those are surely toggles anyway. Those two.
No.
Those titles. So in other words,
toggle hide and
you
show.
wouldn't be able to show it if you can't see it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Each one will toggle. Yes, but toggle for different things, right? So let me just see if I can. So this was person. Okay, hang on. Actually, what we're talking about is having them somewhere off screen, you said.
Or at least at least in a place where then they are sort of not that, in a sense, they're on the map, so to speak, but they're not part of it, or they're a distinct area within it. Which is where I think it gets problematic, having some of them being headings in the map, because
absolutely, that is the issue. So now we're pretending something else. Separating it out using this type of thing. So having a non-editable space at the top of the screen, just like we have at the bottom. So then we're talking about this.
Yeah, essentially, and moving your infrastructure location up as well, so all the hashtags are on the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think that gets. I absolutely You know, no one design gives you all the things you want. I think having those separate makes it much easier for you to treat them as controls, because self-evidently, whatever they are not the same as the things the other side of the line. Otherwise, why would the line be there? So you can guess that. You can quite quickly visually infer that they're in some way different. Plus the fact that, to go back to your point when sort of discussing this earlier yesterday, is that, well, if it's a hashtag, people in the thread know what a hashtag is. So what it probably, if I sort of click on or do something with the @publication control, probably it's going to tell me something about publications. So to the extent I will probably experiment, because I can't be asked to read the documentation. So I'll just click it and see what happens, which is good, because that's sort of what you want them to do anyway.
So just for fun, let's see if we can think of keyboard shortcuts for this. Oops.
Well, I mean, Command H gets used for hide anyway, but it may have a different function within the overall app. And I think that hides the whole app on it at OS level, so you can't really repurpose that. But you could have Command Shift H or Command Option H. I doubt that's being used for anything.
I mean, one thing we could do is, in computer games, you often assign sets of units with a command key or something. So it could be Command 1, Command 2. The user would have to assign this. So they could just quickly, no, that doesn't work. Forget that. So
I mean, well, you could do that, but I think that's kind of advanced user stuff. I think that's making difficulty for yourself at this stage. For the simple stuff, I think basically the difficulty you've got is
I think I solved it.
what this is doing.
I solved
the
it.
other thing is, does Command H, does it hide all hashtags or just this hashtag? Because it's what you want to do is hide this hashtag. So
okay, it's solved. It's solved. Look.
Okay.
Here currently, H hides the selected hashtag. Right.
Yep. Okay.
So here, obviously, we don't need command. We have selected person. So hide everything tagged with person. E is hide everything not tagged with person.
Yeah.
That's it. H and E.
Yeah. How do you get and person back? Then you'd use the menu, because that's until you do the menu, you don't know what you can't see.
That's not a bad observation. We can have this can be grayed out. Okay,
I personally, I actually think, I mean, it's nice to have that, but I would be to keep it simple. I would just, because you've got a list, you have a menu that allows you to, that basically would have all the hashtags defined with show or hide according to their present state. And if you want to put something back, I think people generally understand that metaphor, because it's a bit like when you go into and out of full screen, and what that if you're in full screen, there are some things you're not going to see because they are, pushed out of the way. And that, for instance, your full screen, if you push your mouse up to the edge, you'll see your menu bar. So there is a notion that not everything you're shown is everything available. And I think that's a cleaner implementation than sort of leaving it on screen, and then you're in all sorts of states. Where you'll end up is you'll end up in the sort of the Google what shade of blue do I use for the link, and you'll go off into visual design hell. I would be more tempted to if you say hide that, I hide it and it's not there and I can get it back.
Okay. Okay, I'm just experimenting with something. I'm just adding 2. So this is having it be. So now they would all be there. And slightly, the ones that are kind of hidden are grayed out. Can make this one black. Yeah, I'm going to address what you said in a few seconds because I think that's a good point.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so this is having it all on screen at the same time.
Yeah.
What's going on here? And if we then go not do that, but do this, the problem is, even though I'm keyboard shortcut happy and all of that, it's really nice to be able to click on something and then I get a menu and boom, right? Rather than if you go up here, you have to find it. Because I
Well,
think
you could, okay, you can do it, in which case, but I wouldn't, if you hide something and don't hide it, that's confusing. That's, well, yeah, so what you want to say is something like you want to disable person or something.
no,
You want to turn it off. You're not, if you say hide, that to me is confusing because it's still there. I expect it to disappear. So I wouldn't, I think in that sense, I wouldn't use the term hide.
Because it's still there at the top.
Because it's still there. Yeah. So what?
Yeah,
Because
okay.
and what are you actually and what are you actually doing when you do that? What you're really saying is, I don't want, well, actually originally you were hiding. You said I don't want to see this. I don't want the affordance of the at person control to be in my view space, my view spec at the moment. I think that's cleaner, and I appreciate that it comes with it's slightly more effort to put it back. I don't think it's complicated to even guess where you do that because that's obviously going to be on a menu. Because anything you hide is normally an implied toggle.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So now it doesn't say imply we should hide the heading because the stuff on top is a heading. But anyway, your point is really strong. So the reason I like the idea of click, get a menu, right, or click and then HE, it's quick to turn all of these on and off. If we go into
don't call it hide, so call it disable. So when you put disable, person becomes grayed.
It's not disabled. If I click on hide tagged with person, everything in this main view that is person disappears.
Yeah.
And the heading up here becomes gray. So it is hiding it. It's just letting it know on the menu it's still there. But
I see. Because you separately. Sorry, where I'm confused is you had another state earlier which is where you didn't even show the person, the hashtag label. So I think so. I take from this that your thinking has moved on that effectively that hashtag will never go away. If it's defined in the document, it's there. So the control you have is it's either active as a control, so I can click on it and show stuff, or I can have it hidden or I can I basically can hide the stuff associated with it, in which case it's grayed out. And those are essentially the two existent states of the hashtag. I don't find that sort of wrong or confusing.
Okay. So then the question becomes, well, obviously location and infrastructure here, that's something, if the user manually wants to put it in, they can do that, but that's obviously not the behavior we're talking about now. So there's something relevant, but
yeah, exactly. So I think you just use some kind of a label. I think otherwise the controls get overloaded or the semantics get overloaded, and it's actually less accessible than you imagine it to be.
Yeah, I'm just thinking there may be quite a few tags and they would then be too many to fit on here because many users will only have a 13-inch like me, even though I'm doing them with the 27. So that's an issue. So I do like the idea of having a menu here. Maybe it should be a submenu actually. Okay, hang on. Okay. Okay, this is going into clever stuff. So what we probably want to do Where's the submenu?
It should come under the view menu to my mind, because we're explicitly here talking about view interaction. So it should be something come off the view menu, because when you do this to me in UI UX terms, you're interacting with the view. You're changing the view spec.
But the view is also the view menu is also for the right view. That's why I have a map. Hang on, can you excuse me for literally 1 minute, please?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Right, okay. Interaction wise, do you also like the whole being able to click on something and do something rather than have to hunt for a menu?
That's a very loaded description. It depends.
What I mean, obviously, I know you know what I mean, but in this context, like, boom, right? You have it here, control click, rather than have to go up here for something.
I think my experience is that there's a sort of false binary nature to this. The reality is that just having everything on a menu sounds great until the menu gets too long, and then you have a menu with submenus in it, and then actually the simplicity falls apart. So for very small thing, the other problem comes when, this is something I've learned actually, assisting the sort of Tinderbox community, is the danger of having stuff that effectively is on the right click control click menu, but that's only a subset of what's available, is that someone will never find the other stuff, because as far as they're concerned, that's all they're allowed to do. Yeah. So I'm in two minds, to be honest. I mean, I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because I can see all the problems with it, and the truth is, I'm gonna go for it. But I mean, I have no problem with you being able to do. It's nice to be able to do stuff immediately. But I think also the other observation, and I get, and again, this comes from sort of teaching technology to people, is that it's also very reflective on the mindset of the person, either the designer or the person using it. Some people are very visual, so they can't see it, it doesn't exist. Other people are very abstract, so they don't want to sort of futz around with the UI. They want to go to the structure behind. They want to, basically part the curtain, get the thing they want, put it out again. And the twain broadly will never meet. Because that's a sort of a diversity I think I see go quite deep. There's something wrong with it. I mean, it's just the way people work. So which is why, in an app, you generally have to have anything that has a shortcut still has to have a menu item somewhere, even if not what you
absolutely
use. Yeah. So there is absolutely no problem with doing that. I find the problem of the interesting thing is over time that, with the deeper tools I've used, the things that are just available are actually become the hardest to discover, because what happens is you get a diversion between the design intent and the experience. So the design intent is, well, of course you'll do this, so I don't really have to explain it, because this is Apple documentation writ large. We don't need to explain it because it's so self-evident, which is why people have to write third-party books to explain how this intuitive interface works, because actually it isn't intuitive at all. It was only intuitive to the designer. So that's the problem in the round, I think, and I don't claim to have an answer to it.
Yeah. Well, okay. So in something like this, a key thing we probably want to do is work on a subject matter at a time. Like people and institutions are obvious ones, right? So we could even have that's a double. The hashtag, of course.
What you're describing at the moment is what essentially you're doing here is you are by proxy making a visual query interface. Because
I didn't hear that. The line went.
Sorry. What you're doing, and I don't mean this in any loaded sense, but you are essentially describing a visual query interface, because in a sense, you're saying, if I click on Cynthia Haynes, who is Cynthia Haynes? What other entities does she relate to, or what dates are pertinent to Cynthia Haynes, or all these other things that you might ask. And in this case, you're doing it by the affordance of a visual link. So this is the beast we're wrestling with, because I think this becomes helpful, because the question you're trying to ask of the interface must have some impact on how the interface is sort of constructed. And this is the reason I made the point about the hashtags being separate, because when you mouse over them in your model, effectively what you're seeing is you're seeing an immediate visual query. I know it's inferred and all that. Let's forget how it's created, but the point is, you do that, you mouse over it, you effectively get an answer to a question. And that, I think, probably may help in terms of trying to figure out how these bits seem together. I mean, the difficulty you also have is because you are inferring linkage. This is why you're getting all these false positives of AR in a word.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there is, I think, one has to just take that on the nose. That is a limitation, and the only way around that is by more explicit writing. And this is very akin to the early days of wikis, where if you couldn't find a camel case word that described what you wanted, you were stuffed. And the only way you could link to it was, in the very early days, was to use that camel case word that rarely then worked in the sentence. So you ended up with the most god-awful text. We're trying to just make a simple relationship. And you have that problem in microcosm here, microcosm in the small sense of you have, in essence, the same problem. And there's no easy solution. I don't think necessarily you should be hunting for one. Otherwise, stuff just becomes more complex.
Well, that's definitely a part of it, but
could here's a thought. Thinking of affordances that the framework offers you, could the hashtags be on effectively what do they call them, drawers? It's a bit like you could basically, rather than necessarily show hide all the tags, one thing you might do is say, look, I don't need to, or a bit like some people also hide the doc. It's a preference thing, but the same sort of thing. So, do I need to see these hashtags all the time? Because they're robbing me. One of the things they're doing is that on a 13-inch screen, they are stealing my space. Yeah. In the same way, actually, do I need to see the right map toggle all the time? Maybe that could sort of rail up from the bottom. Because, if you're going to push your working space hard, maybe there are ways that the underlying design frameworks, the Xcode frameworks you're sitting on top will give you some simple affordances that enable you to still have the same controls that you had before, but to give you more space, because space is always a premium in this sort of thing.
So a couple of things then. One thing we could do is make things not hidden, but invisible. And there's a huge difference. What I mean is, right now, if I click on Doug Engelbart, he will not go to any of these things on the left here, which are Doug Engelbart terms. But what if they are visually gone? But if I click on Doug, it'll still point to them, so you can still mouse over to see what they are.
Yes, that's powerful once you know what they mean. When other people no, so let's just explore that for a second. So, if I moused over Doug Engelbart and I saw a link, if I moused over one of the links that had no endpoints, would I see the explanatory text? If I did, that probably would self-explain, because it would give me an indication of what's the other thing that I can't see.
I think it should also highlight the whole thing. So let's just.
I see. So if I mouse over Doug Engelbart, let's say there's 6 lines go off to the left. If I mouse over one of those lines, if you sort of hold focus and mouse over it, it would then effectively pull the thing at the end of that link in front of the curtain for a moment. And then if I move the mouse off the line, it would disappear again.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, that's quite an. I mean, if that works, that's quite a nice and quite sophisticated way of doing it. It's always difficult with these things because my call yesterday was actually talking through all these things. And what's really interesting is actually most of the people who are starting out, well, they'll start by giving you a long, complicated explanation of why they need all this power and sophistication, and then they'll be shown something. Yes, but I just want to, followed by something that is not represented by anything they've been shown thus far. And when it then becomes a case of, look, it should just, or in other words, I don't want to do any work. And this is the real problem in any knowledge thing, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't seed enough information in there, you're never going to get particularly good stuff out. And you would hope in a short order the user of this would realize, well, okay, if you want links, you're going to need the lanes. Okay, so.
I'm doing something different now.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing that happen.
Yeah,
I'm not a great fan of vertical timelines, I must admit. Yeah, I just think as a visual design terms, they are actually not that helpful. Yeah, I know they were very trendy in Facebook and things, but they actually make time quite hard to understand. Yeah.
So the reason I'm doing it vertically is because that's what we have already. And also it means you spend a lot less space on each line. But
and I understand that. Let's just unpack this bit.
But also the call is recorded, so it's also for that.
Sure.
So I'm just wondering now if we now explicitly choose to define what the 4 different parts of the screen are. Because if we say top to bottom is time, if people choose to have that in the system, right, then we have that there. Boom, clean that up.
But you say that, but actually your map is not is not described in those terms. Addressability it didn't happen in 1943.
No. What I'm talking about is where these things are. In the same way that on the top of the screen, we have these hashtags. Let's say we've decided that's the way it is, end of story, right? Let's pretend.
So how are those the 2 important things for those 2 axes? What dictates what turns up as a hashtag? Is it because that is the superset of all the hashtags that people have put into their concept notes? Or is it set by the app?
What I'm talking about right now is that the software decides where things go, so that on top here, all the hashtags will go.
Yep.
And on the any dates that is referred to in here will show up on the left. So then either we have two more dimensions, or, you know, that's all, because as you said, in this view, ARC has not been moved to the level of 1962. That is something that could be enabled by a pure timeline view, which probably should exist, right?
Sure.
But it's basically, can we do this? Is this useful? Because then you could do the H home, right?
So one thing I can see from this is you're not going to be doing, well, I suppose, if you pick something that has a date and a hashtag, what do I see?
Currently, you either click one or the other, or
no. But if I click Peter Wasilko, does that throw a line to person? Yes. So if the reason what I'm thinking about, so if there's if I interact with the object, it shows both its time and its hashtags. If I whereas with the hashtag, I just see the relationship to one of those. I was just wondering whether you actually need to have the time and the hashtag showing all the time. If they were doing different things, then you wouldn't need to have two axes. The other thing that I'm conscious of is that we're using a very limited time range here. We've only got about 8. Well, we've got an unrealistically small number of dates if the dates are going to be extracted from the content, and that will scale badly for you. I mean, if I learned the one thing I've learned about timelines is that they just don't like data that has data that has time in it. Just never does what you want. You'd like to have a nice even distribution of dates and things with dates. Never happens. So you may rapidly have too many things for left column.
Yeah, so it would probably need to be scrolling, right? That's one thing that I accept. But also, if there is nothing between 1943 and 1962, they'll be next to each other.
Well, one thing you could thought of, you could do that probably the next level of design, and because I know it has implications of cost and engineering things. But I mean, I think at some point, something like that, you'd need if the as it were the app did a first pass, say, hey, I found all these dates. The user might want to say, look, I really don't need, I delete this one. I don't need these. And I said, this set is now the set I want on the screen. So if it's not shown, you wouldn't get a backlink to it. And that might declutter it, because I'm sure that the dates that you have, the overall set of dates you'll have in any given map will not have, each date will not have events or linked thing nodes of the same salience.
Yeah, I mean, right now I am not all that concerned about dates issues, because there should be a proper timeline view here or in VR. And I spent many days coming to exactly the same conclusions you have. What I'm primarily...
Yeah, I'd be tempted just not to try and put time in. Make it rod for your own back in this map. I think the hashtags do make sense, because they give you a quite quick sort of, you could say rough typography, wrong word probably, but you can pick out types, strands within this without having to resort to, say, having color codes, and then you end up with a map that looks like a John printing set. I think you're probably overloading the view by just trying to put in dates at this. I just park that as something to do later.
I pretty much agree. What I may do is keep some of the dates because they are significant, and leave them as concepts.
Yes, yeah, exactly. In the short term, and I think, and the way I deal with that said, probably hinting that in what's needed in the longer term is a timeline, but that's a cost and design issue. But you're absolutely right. I mean, a different view spec of a timeline. So, so for instance, most of the documents I work in Tinbox, I can either look at it as a map, I can look at it as an outline, I can look at it as a tree map, I can look at it as a what do you call those tree graphs, boxes within boxes. I can look at it like
Yeah.
that. I can look at, and then there are and then another couple of spatialized things. So I can do something into what you're doing here. I can take an object and I say, just show me the document as linked to from this object. So anything that is linked directly or via can be reached by a linked path is on screen. Anything in the document you can't reach via an explicit link in the document can't be reached. And these are just view specs. It's all underneath. It's the same atomic data. Your atomic, which is in a sense the same here, because although you don't have, well, the one place you see your concepts is on the map. So that there isn't somewhere you go to that's got like a little list of concept boxes sort of thing, because the concepts themselves are stored behind the curtain. You define them via a box, you put them away, that's fine. But in fact, that's your building block. That's your building block for your view specs. So that's quite good. And there's a quite powerful actually thing in that, another useful way of thinking about why you're doing this. Because this again came up in a couple of recent conversations we've had people elsewhere about, when you're sort of mining into knowledge, is one of the things to say, yes, I know it'd be nice if the computer just magically found anything you asked for, but the way we think is sort of diffuse. The way we describe things is not hard-edged. So one of the things to learn to do is something of significance is something you probably want to mark as something you might want to come back to, which is slightly different, a slight tangent to the sort of highlighting approach. Just say, yeah, no, I do know that I need to, Ted Nelson is someone I need to come back to, within this corpus of work, within this document. And so I'm going to that's why, you're making the concept.
But there's two.
And then I can do all this other funky stuff on top of it.
Yeah. So I've taken a screenshot here and pretended that the outside are set by the software.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and arbitrarily set space on the right, time on the left, hash on the top. But there is another problem, so to speak, and that is there's two types of concepts in here. One are the concepts that are what Bob Stein, Cynthia, etc. are interested in. Those are the things that I've currently got on top. That is to help the reader see who writes about what.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the left, I have more explanatory concepts, some of which I will remove. By the way, author now does not export a concept if it isn't in the document. So it doesn't have a huge glossary of, Wendy Hall and stuff, in case I've used Wendy Hall before.
So sorry, just so I understand. So I can define a concept in the document, and it would appear on the map. But if the concept is not used in the, for want of a better term, the body copy of the document, then it is not exported, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, obviously at some point people will trip over that once to learn it, but I don't think that I certainly don't have a problem with that. That seems sensible. So that just makes sure you don't hose out a lot of stuff. And actually, another useful point about it, that I think it tracks back to the conversation we had moons ago with Chris and I can't remember his name now, but anyway, we were talking very early stages back in about 2017 or something about some of this, and that is that when in effect you want to delve down further into something, you don't necessarily want to drag the whole deepest explanation of everything everywhere you go. I mean, it would.
No, absolutely.
On mine's out, it's convenient, but it comes with a cost. So I think what you described makes eminent sense.
So there's two types of concepts in here. One is that stuff. The other one is NLS, ViewSpec, Kodiak, NIC, all. That is stuff to help people understand the text. It is not designed to help them understand how the text relates to other text. So in a sense, that's more of a traditional glossary. So what I'm wondering about is, in this view, I would probably want to hide it. One thing that you did actually that I can now think about is in your timeline of hypertext, you didn't show any publications that no one else cited. So what we could probably have here is a view where, no, because these do refer to each other. But I mean, if there's some concept that no other thing refers to, then I guess it's not that useful.
Well, one of the things, so and it's always difficult, this early stage thing. So, but what I hear in what you're saying is that, okay, there are of these nodes we see, all the bit in the middle, leaving aside the, you know, your edge things. Of these nodes in the middle, they actually are they are the same, but there are two different types. They are things that are my concepts, which I absolutely and intentionally intend to be part of the sort of contingent metadata that goes out with this document. So they are footnotes in another way. You know, they are definitely part of the work as I wish it to be experienced by others. Some of the other stuff is sort of glossary, so that's more like appendix stuff. One thing you could do is just make it possible to indicate which they are. So I mean, the point, so you might find it easier to have a default. So maybe everything defaults to a concept, but you can mark some concepts as effectively being purely glossary items. So as they have a more secondary role in metadata terms, and perhaps in some of your view specs.
Well, here we go. I think we've got it. I call them Doug concepts, right? Because I can then hopefully turn off all Doug concepts. That's not a Doug concept. That's a Doug system. That's not a Doug concept. So that means I turn NLS down to under here, some kind of software thing. But yeah, doesn't that make sense?
I can see it will work. I don't think it generalizes. Because that's really what you're getting at is that I think, I mean, you actually sort of said it yourself when you're describing it, that there are, on this map, there are concepts and there are glossary items. And one may be a subset of the other, but what at the moment is not being defined by the author, who really is the person who is the only person who is able to really make that delimitation, is which are full concepts and which are glossary items. Now, as I said, you could do it to make it easier, rather than a horror thing where you open some input and it's full of buttons and whatnot. You could say, fine, well, look, you make a concept, but you may want to have a thing that said that you could label this concept as a glossary item. And then you have something tractable, because your application can then do stuff with that. You've immediately applied metadata. You said, you know, whether you treat one as a subset of the other or whether you treat them as two disparate sets doesn't really matter. The point is that you can, with that delimitation, you can say, you can know that this node is not one of these nodes, which is difficult to do. I think I totally get where you were going with the thing of marking it up for, you know, say Doug's concepts, but you're doing that, you're adding another hashtag that now has to fit into this already full bar on your 13-inch screen. And then you find, oh gosh, now I've got to do the, you know, I've got to do the Peter Silko concepts, and I've got to do the Caitlin Fisher concepts, because that's how real data goes. So this is dangerous. Right. This works for one thing. Does it work for 20 nodes? I would suggest not, which is why I'm making a suggestion I am. So
you jokingly call it an end node, right? Which of course it isn't, but I understand what you mean. I think that's a good way of looking at it. So you're saying that maybe we should just, unless someone specifies, call general concept, something like that.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if you want to keep them all this. You see, I think you articulate it quite clearly. There is a difference between effectively glossary items and concepts, and I would do just that. Anything else is you're just making it harder, because you've run out of space already for your hashtags.
Yeah, but yeah,
which is
completely agree with the issue at hand.
So I think that you're so turn the problem around. If you had a simple method where, I would probably start making everything a concept, but you say, oh right, actually this concept is basically a glossary item. In other words, it has a more secondary role. What can't you do if you had that delimitation? So each node knew whether it was a full concept or a glossary concept. What have you lost by doing that? I think it's a way to ask the question.
Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile question, but I think this is, we're doing something very specific by making a book here.
Yep.
So I do think that your constant push to generalize is really, really worthwhile. So therefore, I don't want to do that. I think everything should be a concept. But to get around this niggle we have now, we may have to go back to this, having it in a menu rather than having it at the top of the screen purely, so we can fit more. Maybe
I'm still I'm still not sold on this way of delimiting the nodes at this fundamental level via hashtag. You're just going to end up with more hashtags. I've never seen, apart from a totally controlled vocabulary that has a whole different set of problems associated with it. I've never seen a clean keyword set like that. It just goes like to. So I genuinely think.
Let me show you where I agree, because, hang on, what we're talking about it now is really conceptually core and very important. But there is here. So for a bit, we played around with this idea. Sorry, that's not the right one.
Just the colored sort of pills. Yeah.
So what we learned there is when I actually tried to mock this up, very few things would be tagged. I would definitely tag a person, organization, or location, but the difference between a tool and a technology or process, that's when it gets very iffy. So you're absolutely completely right. So what I'm trying to do here is, if you don't tag something with general concept or whatever, that's okay, right? You don't have to do that. So maybe we could have something called untagged, hide untagged.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I won't die in a ditch over it, but I mean, if your general concept is my glossary term, then we're probably on the same page. If not, I think you've still got some problems to unpick. I don't think just going to the hashtag, because this is something more fundamental. And the hashtag I see as a query, as effectively as a lightweight query interface onto your map, and helping you surface relationships that you may not bring immediately to mind, if you're, especially, if you want to see it rather than do it in here. You rightly brought up a point that for instance, some of the things on the left of your map are essentially descriptors. They're glossary terms. They're just things you need somewhere. If you don't know what a view spec is, you might need someone to tell you what it is, but it's not an important part of the story you're otherwise telling in this map. So I don't think that that's something you want to sort of do as hashtags. Or you could have a hashtag. Well, I mean, you could bring it back together. So instead of calling it general concept, call it what it is. Just say it is a glossary item, and you have hashtag glossary. And if you take all that out, your glossary terms fold away. But I do think it's actually, I hadn't really thought of it until you mentioned it. I do think it is quite fundamentally important to have a way of de-interleaving or concepts. These are the things that are important in the document that I'm writing, the problem that I'm working on. These other things are effectively appendices to it. They're deeper explanations. So that's, we call them glossaries thus far. They are germane to what I'm doing, but they are not really part of it. They're there if either I forget or I know that people who will need to interact with this may not know what this thing is and requires a deeper explanation. But that's I think that's a far more fundamental sort of dividing line in terms of the way that thing is on, in that map space, than whether it has some hashtag or not. It's it's fairly hard-edged thing. And the answer is, if you're unsure whether it's a glossary thing or not, don't make it a glossary item, which is where I'd almost start from things being, I would start with things all being concepts and mark them as glossary items, because that's probably the way you'll go. The expert might know, okay, or they maybe copy something in from another document. Most people will probably start to say, okay, yeah, there's this, I need to cover that aspect of it, but wait a minute, actually, that's probably self-evident. That's basically, now I'll treat that as a glossary item. And you're doing this very gentle triage, both to make sense for yourself and hopefully in the due course to your reader or the viewer, say, of the map or the data in VR. and that's that's a much more fundamental step than whether this is a grouped concept in terms of a location or some sort of hashtag I'm creating. It's a much more fundamental divide, and it will help you corral the mess of the data more easily. Because if you don't have that, everything ends up front of the curtain.
Yeah, but the thing is, primarily the software is for a student, and everything is a concept. Let me background process what you said for a bit. While we look at this, so I click on Adobe here, and I see it's connected to PDF. I go to this definition. In here, Adobe Visual Meta PDF 1993 and infrastructure are all bold. When I export it to Reader, for some reason, infrastructure and 1993 are not bold. I think it would be more useful to make them bold. Right. I wonder why infrastructure is not bold, because now you can click to Adobe, which is useful, except for that issue.
Yep. No, I'd agree. I suspect, I'm sure there's a complete no-foul implementation thing. It's probably just in the way that, the code takes the glossary, probably reads. I guess it's parsing the stuff out from the first paragraph of text, would be a naive assumption.
I do think it's taking everything, like Eduardo. Let's see. Oops. Oh, I have that issue. Thank you. So I'm gonna have a look at him. Oops. So yeah, I mean, here it's doing everything.
Okay, hold on a second. That's interesting. So it's picked up the USA in that. So I suspect what's happening is it's probably because the code as it exists at the moment has not been told otherwise. It's probably trying not to get spammed with hashtags, because it may be using code that has been designed for some other purpose, where one of your nightmares is you're trying to read the message and something, you got 1,400 hashtags glommed on the end, which are all designed to lead you astray. That's one possibility. And the dates are probably left out because they are not necessarily considered terms. I know you said you had them in there as terms. So so if you go back to who's a 1962, so Eduardo does that, when you look at his, if you open that one up, so 1960, okay, so it's coming out of the timeline. I would suspect, I wonder if you put a space before the minus there, because it's quite an odd, that's quite an odd formatting. I would have put it, I just naturally wouldn't write date minus then nothing. I just want it'll be something benign and unexceptional when you get to it. I don't think there's any.
I think you have a point there. No, but something like that, it definitely is.
I wonder if you put timeline on another line. So I don't know. I mean, the answer is I know sort of, I don't know how much the conversation you have with Jason is on the clock, and therefore, has a cost element to it. But I think that's one to us, almost to us, a developer. So there will be a logic that's being used to parse that text, and you've shown that something that occurs after the first hashtag is found. It's not just taking the first paragraph, or it's not just taking everything for the first hashtag. So that the valid question is, what filtering is it doing that doesn't find that? I mean, I don't know, for instance, if it's filtering out dates. It may have been a benign, supposedly helpful filter that's avoiding you getting.
Yeah, no, it is.
Because no date. What's interesting is no dates. No 4-digit dates are getting picked up, which would suggest to me that they are basically being. Do you have any concepts working. Well, you got GPT-3 in there. That works, I think. So that it's not just numbers alone. But well, sorry, if it's numbers alone, that may be the thing. So I suspect Lotus 123 might work as a node, but 123 might not.
The GPT-3 does not get a definition when I do Command F. Even though it's GPT-3 -3. That's why. Let me just fix that.
Did you see, by the by, did you see the thing Les posted his Twitter feed today about exploits for GPT-3?
No.
You'll catch up to it in due course. But anyway, if you because I think you follow Les's feed, don't you? You'll see it eventually. It was only today.
Always. Not always. Oh, here it is. What was it all about?
It was just a link to something, and oops, I find the right thing, and
here you go. Oh, I gotta go. 1 second. 1 second. Sorry.
Yeah. Which is the Richard Brass?
Right. Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay. So we have 2 issues here. One is doesn't deal with hashtags very well, and it doesn't deal with numbers very well.
Yeah, but I mean, I'd approach it prosaically by saying, so in other words, I don't think, I suspect it's not so much an error, it's an unintentional misassumption.
Yeah, no, whatever. Yes, I mean, it's something that
sure.
can be dealt with, but one thing that may be useful, let's open it up again, is if we, sorry, hang on, where does it stop working? Bob Stein, Q&A. Let's see if I can fix that. Oh, that's really weird. Okay. Hang on. Bob Horn, Bob Stein, Q&A, and then it dies. So Brandel is an issue here. Yeah, there are some weird things. But we're going to look at numbers in themselves. So if we now go to 1962 here and do Command F, we get this, which is good, right?
Mm-hmm.
We also get glossary, which is odd. Shouldn't really do that. But okay, so we get that. But if the did we have any? Okay, here, if I do 2022. But have we defined 2022? Yeah, we have. It doesn't, for some reason, make a glossary entry for that. So if we go to the glossary, yeah, it has the years.
Mm-hmm. Well, you might want to look at one of the things when I did my experiment of doing a visual meta for my thesis, one of the things I tripped over was the fact that the glossary wasn't the lookup wasn't working in Reader, because unbeknownst to me, it was a left and right issue that in the table of contents, it was using headings without ligatures. And in the actual body copy, it was using ligatures, which meant that the visual meta of the headings that was exported wasn't matching because
that's a horrible and known problem. Yes.
Yeah, no. The reason I mention it is I'm wondering if something different but similar is happening. So in terms of, it looks as though at the author end, yes, it knows the concept there is working, but it's not working when you see it in reader, if I understand correctly. So it's possibly due to the something to do with exported metadata that's not quite going as you think. So the answer might be hidden in the visual meta. In other words, can you see in the visual meta what you think you expect to see, and maybe not?
Yeah, I think that's likely right. But for some reason, we've gotten very distracted back to the timeline. I think the hashtags is really the key for us. So let me just try this. Because a lot of interesting issues are coming up. So I'm just changing this to be, come on. It's really bizarre that Google, excuse me,
Sorry.
that Adobe can't design a Figma copy for 20 billion.
What is Figma, by the by?
It's basically a layout program for the web where you can easily collaborate with people.
Okay, right, understood.
I feel too old to use it. It's just, yeah, it's exciting, but I have Photoshop.
By the by, I got your mail. I'll happily make a document that thing sent to Brandel and Fabienne. It took. I needed to sort of just mull on it for a few days, because to make it even as short as it was, or as long as it was, actually took some thinking about it to get to the heart of what the issue is.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worthwhile for you to
because, well, it's a very same issue you're looking at here, because nestled in what we're talking about is this fact that it's all very well having all this sort of extra metadata and stuff, but if it's sort of creation and maintenance isn't easily doable in the tools, then what might happen and what does happen tend to diverge. And it's the story of nearly every metadata system I've worked with. If I think back to the early days of photo metadata, and you'd be poking away at some inscrutable properties menu in Photoshop, to put things in, and you had fields with names that weren't human understandable and things, and it all basically points to the same thing.
Yeah. Hang on. I think. Well, okay. So this is what I'm talking about. Only having these two options.
Yes.
And a long list.
And so, yeah, that makes sense. So, and let me just read it back so you can tell if I've correctly internalized it. So if I press hide, then all the objects linked to that hashtag are lost from the map. And if I put only show, then they come back, but everything else does. If things are hidden on that menu you showed me, if things are already hidden, does the hide become show?
Then it would be show.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay, so I think, yep. I think that, and that's much simpler than where we started. A long way around.
Yeah. So let's see. Basically, what we're doing is just adding this to everything. Oh, that's weird. That's I don't like giving him badly done mock-ups. So you've ordered your iPhone 14, right?
Yeah, I had to, because what's become quite apparent in recent months is that because my NFC sensor had died, and I think it may actually be because I had a perfectly kosher battery repair, but it wasn't done by Apple. It was done by sort of kosher party. It may be that it's doing one of these things of I don't recognize some of the components, or I've dropped the thing that's just broken. But either way around, because I can't use the well, it says Apple Pay, but it's the NFC sensor. A number of things are now proving hard to do.
You don't need to sell me on why you're doing it.
Yeah, so no, I mean it's fun to do, but to be perfectly honest, on a sheer pragmatic cost basis, I would have held off another year, because the 14's not necessarily a massive stretch over the 13. Well, which is why I'm buying the Pro, because looking to the long term, if I'm going to go and buy an expensive phone, I might as well not buy the one that's last year's tech. And not because for bragging rights, but simply that if I'm going to keep it for 4 years or something, I might as well have something that's new now, given how fast the tech moves.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I in photographic sense, I have the equivalent of 10 years, so that the quality of the camera will be quite lost on me. But some of the other stuff's interesting now.
I'm not sure if it will be lost on you, because I am not upgrading. I have the 11 and it's okay. But if the LiDAR is better, and I haven't been able to find that out, that could be something very interesting for VR.
Yeah, I think it does, because it does. One of the things that it has, well, one interesting thing I'd be interested to try out is that I've got 16 running on my iPhone 10. Interesting enough, it seems fine. So I thought I'd do that for updated Lizzie's phone. But it seems to, you probably were running the beta, but it seems what you have to do with a normal phone is you update from iOS 15.6 to 15.7, and when you do that, you then get an option update to 16. And I'm not quite sure what it is that whether it's just Refusenix getting upset that they're feeling obliged to update, or whether it's something more than that. I have no idea. But anyway, I'm running at 16, and that seems to work. But on the new phone, because my old one doesn't have LiDAR
already.
Sorry,
you have the 14?
No, I've got my iPhone 10, which is because the 14 doesn't come until next month.
Right. Yeah, that's what I thought.
So I've updated the 10, but when I get the 14, one of the things I'll be able to do is to improve the quality of my AirPods Pro by using LiDAR. I think one thing is something like you can improve the fit by. I haven't looked at it, but I guess you point the LiDAR at your ear and it works out probably the best size thing to put on the end, or something crazy like that.
I think it uses photography for that, actually, because I did that for my headphones, and I don't have have that yet.
Yeah, but I've got some first generation AirPods Pro.
Me too, same.
But as I'm out, well, when I'm out and about, I'm sort of out and about less in terms of if I'm out, I'm normally walking or bird watching or something, so my phone's stuffed in my pocket. So actually, apart from travel, I sort of travel for work so little now, or have of late, that it's amazing how little I use these things. It's sort of difficult. I always find myself thinking, why on earth am I getting these? But eventually they give out. He says, looking at the fact there's an unused pair of AirPods sitting right next to the AirPods Pro on my desk.
Cool. So this is what we're talking about. Isn't it? Did I lose you?
No, I'm still.
Oh, okay, it was just a thing on my phone.
I'll drop out on my line. No. By the way, I'm sorry. For some, I can only assume my Mac must have rebooted itself last night, because I'd almost finished doing the bio copy for you, and it's gone this morning. I cannot. It's ridiculous.
Did you, not to be annoying, but did you do it in Author?
No. It's actually in.
We are
It's in.
nation.
Sorry. Let's go away.
Is that Mark
Call out.
Bernstein?
No, it's because my Twitter client, if I have listened to one thing, it turns the sound on for everything, and I happen to have moused over a video of the orange clown face man, who I don't listen to at all. No, I was writing it. I was just because I needed to do something last night, and I was writing it in BB Edit, because I'd taken, it was because I'd taken the copy off the Future Text website. Really? Anyway, it won't take me long. What I'm going to do is I'll give two URLs, one of which is my Google Scholar page, and the other one is a listacrobat.com, which is some of my sort of effective, you might say, public bits and bobs that might be sort of one who's trying to sort of get a handle on what I've been doing. But as most of what I do is sort of consultancy one-to-one, I don't really show up in the public stream very much, apart from the FAQs and things that I write.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. It's just to put you in context.
Yeah, sure. No, one of the things I was thinking back, but I did actually contribute to stuff like PDF back in the 90s and to the IPT4, because I was actually I made submissions into that when IPTC4. So that was the XML version, the when TIFF tags for photos moved from TIFF tags into XML. I was involved in sort of that in a small way, but actually put in things that sort of made it to the end. I guess people something to get hold of. Well, it's sort of difficult, because sometimes it's difficult to explain, because I it's amazing. I was listening to someone having just the same thing, transparent what they're doing, and most people assume that if you're doing knowledge work, you're in IT, which is definitely, I wouldn't know how to build a Windows server from the ground up, and if I did it, I'd do it badly, or a Mac one for that matter, which is what I think of as IT. Whereas basically working mainly in a software mediated space, which is the closest I get to it. The fact that I just happen to use software for everything doesn't make me an IT person.
No, I feel the same. Here's a question.
Yep.
On top of this menu here, if we're going to do this, we have two choices where it should be. Let me just put this on top and then we can discuss it. Should this menu be under map or under defined concepts? Because we already have them showing up at the top here. So it may just be good to add a submenu if it's a hashtag.
You could do. I mean, I suppose if I was feeling all pure, I mean, I'm not making any claim to be a expert in UI design and things, but I might, if I didn't know otherwise, I would assume it was a property of the map because you're looking at the map. But as you've got the defined concepts there and you already have the hashtags listed, that seems an eminently sensible place to put it. I mean, I think the unresolved bit, which is an issue apart from another day, is sort of who and how and where the number of hashtags is controlled. Because I don't think you want too many of them. The sad thing is, it's one of those lessons that's hard to learn. I watch this every time I work with people doing this new, that you explain to them about using, tagging rather than Google search for everything. But brutal raw regex over everything. And the next thing, they've created 1,000 keywords and can't find anything because they've got too many. And then, right, if I'm a bit more thoughtful in my keywording, I'll get more out of it. And it's kind of hard to teach before the fact. So in other words, you can let people add hashtags. I suspect they'll end up adding too many, and then they'll blame the software for the fact that not all the hashtags will fit neatly on screen. So I think there's some gentle preemptive guidance somehow to be thought of there.
Yes.
I mean, just thinking out loud, one possible way to do it is you almost back it off as a configuration thing, and it becomes like a part of the properties. So in other words, it's not something you do on the fly without thinking about it. You do it deliberately somewhere else, so you don't just throw everything in the bucket. I think the fact that you have to take a trip somewhere else to do it makes you think, okay, do I really need another concept here?
Yeah, some things should not be too easy. Sure, I agree.
And it also it gets you out of the problem of sort of appearing to be too constrictive or always saying no, because there are plenty of users whose start to everything, start, finish, and end of everything is, I want to do this, and if I can't, all the toys go out of the cot immediately. That's fine, that's their choice, but it's not a comfortable way to live with software, especially when the software is trying to help you from making unforced errors.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, I'm going to try to mock this up now. It's getting a bit messy doing dialogues. So
well, I don't know if that's helped any, but
yeah, it has actually. One thing we've done is gone away from time. Time is its own thing, which will be dealt with.
I think you'll thank yourself for not trying to put it too much into the map, because it'll just. The other thing is, I mean, I absolutely understand the impetus. It would be nice to do now, because it's all very well talking about a timeline view, a view spec that you don't yet have, because that comes design, time, cost, and all those other things. But it doesn't. And the useful thing today, for instance, we've already discussed some of the problems associated with dealing with time anyway. And the what goes on to timeline, why it goes on to it, and in some of Bob's comments on that, this point about dates of birth, for instance, versus things are not totally off piece, I think, in the sense that the hard part, again, he's thinking about this with the experience of having to sort of deal with seeing the wood for the trees for a long time, in terms of paring away what you can put into something like a mural type infographic, whereas most of us just want to capture all the dates and assume that it's the computer's problem to sort it out. And I put in the for you for later in messages to you. There's another. I think it's a guy called Richard Braff. I don't know if you've seen his book, which is a sort of a grammar of visual design in terms of infographics, so it's not trying to be a design book. What it's really talking about here are the patterns that you see when you look at diagrams, and it's a timeline of how operas diffused across Northern Europe in the 1850s, and it's that because it was part of a challenge. There was some conference, this annual conference, and the data set that year was this thing, and I think won the prize with him, and I saw it. But I thought it was interesting. It just shows how this really interesting relationship between sort of time and the data around it, because although there's a strong temporal access to the data that's being shown, it's not necessarily a timeline, though you'd call it that for want of a better term. So in other words, there's a definite temporal access in it, but the view spec is, even though it's in this case a PDF, the view spec is working much harder on your behalf, and it's
right.
And you know, this goes back to the stuff we did with Adam, you know, last year.
So this is a problem. I did this, and this makes sense, right? Each one would have the show hide.
Yeah.
Hang on, let me just. Obviously, that will be in a different. It'll have a thing and all of that stuff.
Yeah, sure.
But then I added this, so that should probably be. That shouldn't be in the define concepts menu.
No, it probably should be in the map. Yeah, in the map, because so in the define concepts, you're talking, because you when you know, mouse over dot concept and you see those two extra affordances as a sub menu, they relate entirely to that. The other things you've shown probably are more to you, because actually you're reconfiguring the map in a broader way.
So we're back to this then. Which is good, I think. Let's think it's okay.
Yeah.
Oops, why did that go to downloads? Have to clean this mess up. So that means I delete this old one.
I'm glad to see someone else has a desktop like mine.
So it becomes a hashtag menu on the map, showing add menu. Oh God. So all.
I mean, one other way, if you want a sort of set of toggle options, you could always have a multi-way toggle. It takes a little bit extra sort of an explanation to people at the outset, but you know, you could toggle through, say, 3 modes. So you know, everything there, these things not there, everything else not there, and then back to norm. Which, if that's, you might consider that if it's a way to cut down the sort of complexity of the UI. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a matter of the behind the curtain. If you have these nodes, it's just, well, which, you know, where does the input for the right display change come from? In other words, it's all down to the interaction with the user rather than actually what the app's doing.
One second. Okay, so what would the options be? Should probably have one with show all, shouldn't we?
Well, you might almost want that in a section by its own, because that show all is effectively, that's the resetting. Yeah. That's the sort of Uber hammer, just says, right, okay, just put it back, just turn everything back on, basically. And that doesn't apply to any hashtag. That basically applies to the map as a whole.
Just got to get the type the right size.
It also occurred to me, would it help if I went through the timeline section of the document, the one you sent me the other day, and just send it back as an author document minus all the hidden crap characters that have crept in? There aren't many of them. I think I found them all now. Well, I found two sorts, and I found a small number of instances. And probably the easiest way to correct that for you will be to just send you that back, so you could copy and paste it straight back, because there are no links or anything in that. It's just a body copy. Would that help?
Yeah, thank you for saying the last bit, because I was going to ask you to do it on the new document, because I've been working on it, but I've not been working in the timeline, so I can copy and paste the timeline. Yes.
Yeah, no, that seems to be the most useful way to do it. Oddly, one of them, you're getting two things. So you're getting non-breaking spaces, which I'm sure came in via paste. The other one's really weird. It's a non-printing character normally that's showing up as a space actually in author. And it doesn't do anything. It's sort of it's a placeholder for something. So whether it seems to I've seen it coming after italics, but I looked at other italicized texts and it's not happening in every italicized thing. So again, I'm guessing. I mean, one of the things I've long learned to do is never use copy, but always use, where it's available, copy and match style.
Yeah.
Because rarely do I want all the dreck that comes across from a source object unless I'm deliberately trying to copy a visual style.
Yes,
the other thing
that would be useful. Is what
the other thing that's pertinent for you in that is it's something that I don't know how much sanitization is being done in the app, but it's something you might want to put on, somewhere on your doubtless burgeoning list of app issues. In that, because where that may indeed probably will bite you at some point is it'll break something like some of the, well, it won't break the visual meta, but it'll make the visual meta not work in the manner stipulated, because basically you'll get these ride-along characters that aren't what they are to the eye, either because they don't show at all, or because they show like a space but they aren't a space. And when you do a literal comparison of the two strings, they are not alike. They're visually alike, but they're not computationally alike.
Right. Yeah, that's fair enough. By the way, I'm going through here now, removing general concepts. Oops. Because that was a useful test, but it became more complex. I agree with you. So we have, these are dog concepts. So I think we can do things like with this new system. First, if we want to focus on something, this is badly worded, isn't it? What we're trying to do is, I mean, the show all is fine, but show only with. That actually should be hide.
Hide items without hashtag.
Yeah, that's easier, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Do what it says on the tin.
Yeah,
I know. I totally understand, because the natural inclination is to be concise, but actually it goes back to this thing about how flexible our language is, and it doesn't always mean what we think it means to another reader.
Yeah, but what I think is quite fun about this kind of design is you don't know until you try to do the command.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, exactly. I'm not suggesting for a moment that these things are all self-evident before the fact.
I think we should do. So we have so if you hit just the hashtag when you are here, just the hashtag on the keyboard.
Yeah.
Then it will only show those for the hash, but we should probably also have this shift hash. No, we can't have shift hash because that's actually pound. No, that doesn't
Option
exist.
hash.
Yeah, it would have to be option, wouldn't it?
Except hash is on a UK keyboard, it's option 3. So you can't use option. You'd have to use you'd actually need probably do control hash, because that's control option 3 in this country.
Hang on. Hash on a keyboard is option 3, exactly.
So I'd use control options. Control hash, which is control option 3.
That's way too complicated. That's actually speech as well. So I
What?
think we should only have we should have nothing without hash. So, or we could just have the letter O.
Well, could you make it a toggle or a 3-way toggle?
No, because I want to be able to have when I'm in this space, so, you know, I want to work on people now. No, I want to work on the stuff that is important. So I just do hash.
Okay.
Hang on, this is interesting. No, I'll leave it like this. That's what we have here, right? Only.
Do you use any of those things like sort of easy key or cheat sheet to actually show what menus you're actually using?
What I do is generally this, and then I just option and I go, eh. But I did learn that this is 7, the paragraph one.
No, bullet is option 8.
Yeah, I didn't say bullet.
No, because I've discovered I quite often have footnotes in my menu, in my forum posts in the one of the discourse forums I use. That, well, you can't use the first the conventional things. You start with an asterisk, which you can't use because that marks italic text in Markdown. But a dagger, a simple dagger, is option T, and a double dagger is option shift 7.
We have yes, we're missing something here. We weren't thinking. We also need one for highlight or select all events. Don't we?
What you want to show only highlighted ones?
Yeah, like imagine now, when I selected infrastructure, I want to be able to select all infrastructure, not just have them pointed to.
Yeah.
Not just hidden or shown, but.
Oh, I see.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah. So you want to. So this is different to the show. This is you. It's yeah. In which case, I would suggest that the menu is select all, and then you reuse the hashtag of the menu's parent item, which I'm sure the programming can do. So, you know, if this is the that's bigger font than the one above. If my eyes are not deceiving me. No, I'm wrong.
No, I changed it.
All right, sorry. So I can't remember which one you're running off, but if you scroll left in the, so I would say select all hashtag event for this one, and the next one would say select all hashtag hardware, because it just makes it clearer what you're doing. Select all would imply everything on the map to me if I didn't know better. No,
but it's submenu of event, remember?
No, I wouldn't say that's self-evident to me. It's because the show and hide are quite clear because you can expect to go, but bearing in mind that So when you say show all, are you saying you want to see those and only those?
Yeah,
Right, showing, yeah. Yeah, because that makes it clear that we're not in a show hide event. What we're actually doing is we're in an emphasis event, for want of a better term. Yeah, okay, yeah. For what it's worth, I'm not sure you need to do it in all three. I think it makes the third one clearer, but I would not. I'm not going to suggest.
considering we have show and hide, right? These are not going to toggle.
No, I
So
understand.
So we can make it so when you do show only, if it's visible on the screen, it selects all of them.
Yeah.
So then we don't need it.
Okay.
So I'll just write. So I'll just write notes. I'm doing show all of a specific tag, hashtag, select all. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep, that makes sense.
Because going back here now, the timeline ones, I think I'm going to, it's really weird that it only shows, because all of them have timeline colon. So I'm just going to keep that, but I'm going to delete this. Doesn't have any real value. Make sure it's gone from here. Oops. For some reason it wasn't. But liquid is a.
Yeah, because I think funnily enough, time's one of those things where there's a very, very strong axis, for want of a better word, and it's best done in a view, because to a certain extent you do actually want the view to morph.
Yes.
To give that, and I think it's really the link, although the sort of links are nice, but again, the other problem it has, once you've got more than 5 or 6 things linked, you just get a sort of hairball.
Yeah, but now Fabian has managed to put all these cool things into VR from
Great.
From this. You've seen it, right?
I don't think so. No, I'm sorry. I managed to send the email yesterday morning and not attach the thing anyway. I sent.
No, he's got it and it works. But if you go to our website here,
Yeah.
I put it on VR resources.
Okay.
And I've added a few things. Here's Fabian.
Yeah.
There, so you can click on that.
Oh, great. Oh, by the way, I like that thing he sent through, that link, which is I mean, it's a really simple thing, but it just makes it easy to send a link to your VR self without having to try and remember some enormous long.
Yeah, it seems to work as well. It looks pretty cool.
I was amazed by that that thing that was on Wikidata, which was a just under 1,500 character URL, which is one I couldn't paste in the sidebar of Zoom.
Yeah.
Because when I decrypted it, what it is, it's a Sparkle query.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. That was done by and that wasn't Daniel Rossner. It was a guy who turned up to Hypertext 2015, and he did one of the posters. I'm pretty certain he was the guy who did it. And it's interesting, but to me it speaks of a programmer's idea of visual design.
Yeah.
It's ghastly to look at. I mean, no, it's wonderful that all that stuff's there, and in fact, even that thing led me to a couple of systems that I didn't really know about, hadn't heard about before. Its limitation as a design is, so for instance, the reason the dates are all wrong for TED is it's only drawing on data that has a Wikidata object in it.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you
Yeah.
to go back to a long thing now.
Yeah.
You made the difference between a concept and a glossary. Language we
Yes.
can't use, of course.
Yeah.
But we agree on the idea of it. So all of these things over here, like a citation,
Yeah.
which is useful because it connects, with the word
Yeah.
reference and stuff. If I'm going to give that a hashtag so I can hide it, what should I call it?
You see, I would call them glossary terms. I would call them what they are. You call it hashtag glossary, frankly.
Yeah, but they're going to be in the glossary and references. Sorry, and the PDF that we export, all of them. So can't we use something like general or dictionary or define?
But I mean, I still don't, in terms of, making things self-evident, if we accept that these things are essentially, they are nodes that are glossary nodes rather than concept nodes.
No, but Mark, in this world now, it may have to change. In author, we call it defined concepts. The same things in reader are glossary terms. It's the same thing.
Okay. Sorry, that I didn't know. Okay, well, in which case, you as a placeholder for now, I just go with why not go with hashtag general, because otherwise, you go round and round in circles. It broadly gets you, it moves you forward. It doesn't get you mired in a design problem, and you can revisit it later, because doubtless as things evolve, you may find there's a better term, but I wouldn't invest vast amounts of time in trying to find the best term. Partly because really all of this is under change, and I don't think what you're doing here is designing something that's going to be a part of what you're doing that's going to live for a long time. It's just a descriptor that enables you to hide and show a distinct subsection of your nodes. So what's interesting in this is, so there isn't a way at present to add a hashtag to a selection of nodes.
No, not like that. You have to do it one by one.
It doesn't worry me. I can see that's something that people are going to ask for if this metaphor goes further and gains traction.
I'm just biting a few.
Yeah. The only slight thing about general is it is general. It means nothing, which is good in one sense, but not in another, because if it doesn't mean anything, why use it? Because effectively what you're using general there as a proxy for something that is not a concept within, at least in the author context. What do you want to call? Could you do something like hashtag meta? It's a generalized. Again, it's a general one, but in a sense, it doesn't, because it's a less common word. It's sort of, I think slightly less confusing. Okay, so if you don't know what it is, you might have to go look in the documentation. But
I think that's interesting. I mean, like the date here, which we just have now, we're not really using.
Yeah.
This timeline : blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, in terms of what you just said there, person. This is really mentally hard work.
Yeah, I mean, well, but the thing I find interesting, I love the way that the number of times that everyone thinks knowledge work is simple, and it's sort of job for the janitor with a brown coat, because how hard can it be to think about stuff? But actually, it does. It all comes freighted with constraints.
Yeah. So let me try to phrase it. So one of the the key things we're trying to solve is to help a reader navigate a large document that is written by
Yep.
many people. That is why these things are useful. For instance, good one here. She actually works with these other people. That's useful.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see she's interested in VR, AI, and AR. However, so that is its own special thing. But coevolution is probably only something that's going to happen in a discussion on a Doug thing. So we need, that's okay. That can be folded under Doug concept. That's okay. If there can be millions, but the term glossary here itself has to be explained, as does map and citation.
Well, they're meta concepts. You know, I mean, in the real sense of the word, I think.
You use the term glossary. So hang on, aren't there other words for glossary?
Well, for I mean, my sort of simple parsing, you know, if I see something that's talking about a glossary, what I expect to get when I look at a glossary is a description of terms. You know, that may or may, there may be definitions, but that broadly, even at simplest, they're often like, you know, just expanding acronyms is probably the simplest form of glossary, to my mind.
Did you say definition of terms? I think that's very useful. Now, where's the book?
Which book are you looking for?
Keith's book, the book. How can that not be there?
Oh, I'm not sure if mine is to. On this.
Somebody's moved it to another section.
Yeah, I know. I too need a bigger bookcase. I assembled 4 Billy bookcases the other day, and they're all full, and they're stacked too deep on each shelf. And there's still 2 piles of books on the floor now. I look.
I think we can call it just a term.
Terms, yeah. Don't have a problem with
that. Okay, so
I must say, I'm pretty much through reading Immense World, which for those who are thinking about embodiment and things, is a really good read.
Which one did you say?
It's Ed Young. It's called An Immense World, and it's quite a thick book. It's basically about the senses across the animal kingdom.
Oh, and that's interesting, right?
So, you know, in the fact that we, you know, what we think of as hearing is not necessarily what is how all animals sense sound, for sake of example, and you know, how eyes do really different things, and it's just fascinating. And I think it's sort of spot on in the context of thinking about VR. because you're thinking, well, what are the interactions I can have? What are the senses I can have? I think there's some interesting ideas in there, because often to us as very visual beings, our sense of reality is for most of us is what we see around us, although we know it's sort of confected and the mind is filling in all sorts of bits. But you know, other animals just work off a soundscape, for instance, or they might sense just vibrations on the ground or something, and it starts making you thinking, okay, well, if I'm in a digitally constructed world, why do I have to be so maybe sort of visually driven? what are the other interactions I can do? So for instance, if I had controllers with haptic feedback, and not just for the sense of touch, which is an obvious thing, but just in the way that now phones, for instance, will give you some sort of feedback. I think sort of some of those ideas quite good. That's just why I found it intriguing. Apart from the fact it's actually a really nice, for something that's popular science, it's a really nice read. I've been sort of getting through about chapter a night at the moment.
Yeah, I got a book randomly from Edgar actually a few months ago. He just found something in a bookshop and gave it to me on how animals move.
Yeah.
Which is obviously related. It's really something we need to study, especially now that we're looking at the VR stuff. We shouldn't be constrained only by our default senses.
When you say move, is this to do with some move as in migration, or literally how they physically move in their environment?
Kind of both, but mostly environment. Let me check. Oh, it's upstairs, but yeah.
No, I've got it. I put it on when you mentioned it, I put it on as a reading list, so it's sort of not lost to me. You might also enjoy, or even just go if you're on Hatchards or somewhere that has a good sort of section on such books. There was a book called Where the Animals Go, which effectively was a data viz book, but it's what it is sort of 2 or 4 page spreads of it's effectively visualizations of research. Things like sharks migrating around a reef, or just interesting.
That does sound interesting. So
well, I when I had this book grant when I was studying, I used it. So that's where lots of my nice data viz books comes from, because I can't exactly claim that I sort of need them, but I do find them inspirational.
So, oops. Oh yeah, so this wouldn't be yeah, this would be okay. So basically all this stuff on top here, if we can do the software wise, goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of this just boom goes away. That would be very useful. And then I can choose to have a view with only that. All right, well, let's leave it with that.
Yeah. By the way, the reason I didn't write up much of the stuff there's more stuff on image map and things is to a certain extent that it was a step to something else, and actually it's not immediately important because we've moved beyond the fact that the answer is not image maps. The answer is image maps are part of the problem. Which I think is an interesting thing that I hadn't realized when I started looking at it. My assumption was certainly, okay, so what we need is sort of better image map, but it's actually a bit more complicated than that. Not least of which because I think image maps are still broadly stuck in the early web, in design terms, where what people think they're doing is making navigational elements like we did in the 1990s. And then, of course, it all moved off to Flash, and then it came back as dynamically positioned CSS. So I'd be interested, if anyone's done a survey of how many image maps there are around. I suspect not very many now.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, thanks for today. This was a lot longer than a few minutes. How long have we been going now?
That's all right. So I will. Just a quick one for the bio. Do you want do you want in terms of blog is it sort of first, well, sort of, is it Mark did this or he did that, or is there a general style such as there is or not? I don't mind.
I'll just export what it is now. What I want it to be is linkable. So I like sentences that are, hang on, I'm just going to text it to you. So we can get those connection lines.
Yeah, to which end is the couple of names that I could put in there. Well, I apart from yourself, it probably goes without saying that and I mean, I wasn't going to mention sort of Bob or something, despite having done a fair amount with him, but I thought I might mention, is Dave Millard, does his name crop up or not?
No, try to mention him. Hang on, let me just see if my definition still
Well, I
has.
might mention him and Les, and anyway, if it's probably useful to put that. I wasn't going to mention Wendy because although she'd link, I hardly think I'm sort of in her close orbit.
No, but was she your advisor at all?
No.
Oh, okay. No, she was mine, but she didn't do anything. So,
but she's also basically, she's in a sense. I know Les is the titular head of WACE, but sort of Wendy's it's Queen Bee still in a way. But apart from that, I don't think there are any particular links to make. But
yeah.
The reason I'm going to give you my Google Scholar page is there's something really weird. There's some kind of sort of software fight going on, as far as I work out, between Pure and Orchid, that it keeps adding and deleting all my very few papers. I've given up patience. So luckily it's sort of there on Google Scholar. So that and a page which is this one, which looks very old-fashioned because I haven't updated it in ages, which is
I'm just going to share my screen with you again.
Yeah.
So this is how I'm writing myself up in the bio.
Okay. Okie dokie. So I can just put them into the chat. Where are we? Zoom. So the other, so one of the links I was going to put in is that, and then and the other will be oh, right, okay. Really? So this is, oh, that's really annoying that I can't get to my.
I gotta go.
Okay.
But thank you very much. And
well, just quickly, anyway, in the sidebar there, those are the two links I'll use for anyone who wants to cross-reference, and I think that should give you enough. Okay. I think with events tomorrow, I probably won't be on the call. It's a day for quiet reflection, but so I might do, but I think I probably won't be.
Yeah, I will be on the call, but
yeah, no, I understand, and in other circumstances.
Hang on. I'm just trying to say something. We are going to the funeral, however.
Yeah.
We think it's an important thing to do, but the foreigners may not be as we're getting too close for the big day, so we're doing that in the early, but absolutely, completely understand that you
no, I just got I'm just conscious that as ever, some bad timing of things. We're this close to the wire, and there are things to talk about and things to do. But anywho, I've given myself plenty of homework anyway. And I will I'll try and zero them down in order, because I know you need a bio, and I will do the timeline stuff for you because that needs doing. And then I'll get back to, I thought I'd do another cut. I might have an experiment of doing the same stuff I gave to Fabienne, but maybe putting a bit more structure into the metadata, just to see if he had more to play with.
okay.
And we could figure out how you'd make that. from the source text later. The whole point is with 50 or 60 things, I can almost do it by hand. And I also sent a copy. I should have had a thought to do it earlier. I sent a copy of the first cut of the JSON to Peter Wasilko as well, because I thought if he does go down the thing of playing around with his parsing ideas, it might be useful. Then at least he could be playing around with the same thing that Fabien's actually working on.
Okay.
And you'll notice I deliberately chose something like the 1800s, so we weren't trying to deal with problems of 23 million years BC and that kind of thing.
Good.
Okay, I shall let you go on some.
Yeah, send me those links in your proper bio, please.
Oh no, that as I said, that was just to give you a heads up as to sort of what I thought I'd scrape the barrel for. Yeah, okay, great.
All right, thanks very much. See you when we see you.
Yeah,
Bye.
okay. Take care. Bye.